Thanks a lot, Dwayne. It's really a pleasure to be here. And as you know, as you probably guessed, I do a large number of speaking events around the country in a given year. And it's really exciting to have cases coming on board, getting active, and starting to be sort of doing the 1-2s where we're both talking with the public about what's going on the space station, where they're here to help new users to come in, and it's someone you can talk to. Of course, we at NASA have always been trying to bring in new users, but at NASA we've been focused more on our exploration mission. And sometimes when you're doing business, you really need someone else who's looking at it from a business perspective. And so it's really exciting to have cases here, and I hope all of you will take the opportunity to get to know Dwayne and some of the other cases colleagues that are here today. And I think some of them have been out meeting at different companies around the valley as well. So that's really exciting. I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you big picture about the space station, both what we've learned during that decade it took us to build the space station, but we did a little science on the side. That gives us real insight into what the coming decade, between now and 2020 and maybe beyond, might look like. And it's a really exciting time. The things that used to be hard when we were building the space station, the things that used to take a long time, those are behind us. We now have facilities in place to let you do a lot of research in a turnkey kind of mode. And those of you who've been back in the Expo have seen some of those facilities live, and you've had the opportunity to meet with people that can take you by the hand and get an experiment up to orbit sometimes in as little as 6 months. So it's an incredibly exciting time. I want to pull us back big picture and really talk about the space station from the point of view of us as citizens, and what does this amazing vehicle mean to us in our country. So first of all, when we think of the International Space Station, there are three amazing aspects of it. One is the engineering achievement itself. Humankind has never built anything like this in space before. It's larger than any other space-built structure. It's the most complicated machine ever put in orbit. It's the size of a 4-bedroom house or 5-bedroom house. It has extraordinary laboratory facilities, and it has taken us a step further beyond where we've ever been before in terms of recycling and getting closer and closer to a closed-loop life support system, which is something that we need to go beyond Earth orbit. So it's made all kinds of advances. The space station also captures or represents an enormous international achievement. If you think about where we were at 20 years ago, we would never have considered having collaborations with the Russians. Now we're working with them every day, hand in hand, on the space station. We collaborate internationally across a partnership representing multiple nations, 5 major partners, including the European Space Agency, which has a number of countries as partners. But more than that, those participating countries, those partner countries, collaborate internationally with other countries as well. And now over 63 nations have participated in some aspect of research on the space station, either in research or sometimes in educational activities. So countries as widespread as Kenya or Trinidad have had activities where students could participate in the space station and get excited about math and science from that. So the international achievement in the peaceful use of space is also an extraordinary and ongoing accomplishment of the space station. But of course, I'm a scientist, and so the last piece of the accomplishments of the space station is what I'm going to talk to you about today, and those are the achievements that come from research. And I'll look back at the achievements that come from some of our early research on the space station, just because it takes time for some of these applications to develop to the point that I can connect the dots for you from the very beginning of that experiment happening on the space station all the way to something that's making somebody's lives better here on Earth. There's some really amazing stories. And so as we look at the space station today with assembly complete, as Americans, we've gotten the benefits from the engineering achievement. We'll continue to get more benefits, but we got a large amount of benefit from that assembly activity. And we are continuing to get those international accomplishments. But the decision about our day-to-day extension of is it worth continuing to operate the space station really comes down to the value that that laboratory is returning on Earth for innovation. And there are 3 kinds of returns that we see coming from our research on the space station. The first is the discovery, because we're going into an environment that we've never been in before, and every day somebody notices something on the space station that was not the way they expected it. The fundamentals of what we tell 4th graders when they do their first science fair project is you've got to control every variable, and if you don't control every variable, you're not going to learn about the process. Well, every experiment we've done down here on Earth, pretty much, we have not controlled gravity. And that force overwhelms things. It affects all kinds of aspects of living organisms, of physical systems. When we go in space, we can control those variables, and we still are making discoveries day by day because things don't always operate the way we expect, based on the intuition that we've developed. Another area that we get important research results and benefits from the ISS is in space exploration itself. Already we've tested systems and developed technologies for space exploration on the space station that have extended our ability to go further and go beyond Earth orbit on the next vehicle or the next program. And sometimes those are cost reductions where we figured out a way to do it less expensively. Sometimes they're true technology proof, where we didn't know how to do something before and now we do. And that lets us imagine and start planning for a destination that's further away. But finally, there are those benefits that return to Earth, where we take the knowledge, the discovery, the technology improvement that was accomplished on the space station, and that comes right back home here to the taxpayers that supported this endeavor in the first place. And those exploration benefits turn into benefits here on Earth. And those stories and those examples are really, in the end, why we explore space. When humans explore, they advance. When humans don't explore, they stop advancing. And so those advancements turn into things that create business, they create business opportunities, they create profits, they build companies, and they save lives on Earth. And so that's some of the examples that I'd like to talk about with you today. Or maybe we'll just look at this chart. Here we go. So that's just a chart to remind us about discoveries, and I'm going to show you just a couple examples of some discoveries, some recent discoveries. This is an all-sky X-ray image taken from the MAXI instrument on board the International Space Station. On the left, you see one observation. That instrument is actually looking at the entire sky and looking for X-rays, and you can see kind of the background image. On the right, you see a sudden X-ray burst that occurred last year, and that X-ray burst was of extraordinary power. It was the most powerful X-ray burst observed directly by these kinds of X-ray instruments. It was also observed by NASA's SWIFT satellite, which is a free-flying satellite also looking at X-ray bursts around the galaxy. The SWIFT guys were faster in sending their naming claim in, so the burst got named for the SWIFT satellite, but it turns out the MAXI instrument on ISS saw that event 2 hours earlier, and the scientists put their data together in the publication that came out in Nature last August. And what they found is that this is really the first observation, direct observation, of a relativistic X-ray burst coming from a black hole consuming a star. Now, when I read this, I said, I've seen that in planetarium shows all the time. You can see a picture here of an artist's rendition of that, but it was something that scientists had not actually directly observed. By putting the two instruments worth of data together, we got some really extraordinary power in the assessment of how much power that event caused, and they were able to confirm what this observation really means. It's quite an exciting, just pure discovery, something never seen by humankind before. And it's also our first publication in Nature, which is pretty exciting for scientists. Another recent discovery, even after 50 years of human spaceflight and a lot of flight docks looking at a lot of astronauts, another discovery that's been made relatively recently, over the past year and a half, is that some astronauts, when they go into space, they have some vision impacts. When they return home, some of those astronauts' vision does not recover. And scientists are now looking at why that would be. It looks like it has something to do with the shape of the eye and the pressure in the nervous system, pressure on the optic nerve, and the way that the pressure in the spinal pressure affects things. But it's still under quite a bit of investigation. It also, and this was published in Ophthalmology in August, it also turns out that, and this is roughly 60% of long-duration astronauts will have some kind of impact. A smaller portion of them don't have their vision recover. Some astronauts, it's plus 0.5 diopters, so you can think of diopters as the glasses in the drugstore. And so that's not too bad of a set of reading glasses. But there are some individuals that have had as much as plus 2.5 diopters. That's getting up there in terms of what you can buy over the counter. And those are some significant vision losses over time. So it's a brand new effect on the human body, and something that people are interested in for health on Earth as well, because we do see vision loss and vision impacts in people with some kinds of cardiovascular problems. and other things going on, it's opened up a new way of looking at physiology of the human body. And it took a while. Until we had a lot of astronauts living long durations on ISS, it was a pattern that we had not picked up in the medical data. We've also had some publications recently come out about the link of this data to nutrition, where we found that there are certain different polymorphisms, different versions of genes that different people have that affect the way you use folate, which is a B vitamin, and it appears that it may be possible that certain astronauts are more vulnerable to this because of that polymorphism they have. So it's a really interesting area. It has important implications for the ground, and it's a true discovery made on the International Space Station. Another really important discovery on the International Space Station which was done on a number of shuttle flights as we were assembling it, was the discovery that some microbes, when they go into space, become more virulent, more able to cause disease. And I've made a little cartoon here to show you the three patterns that have been observed. Some microbes become more virulent, so on a per bug basis, if you will, they're more able to cause disease. Others just multiply more rapidly, so each bug isn't any better or nastier than any other, but they multiply more rapidly, and that allows them to get a leg up in causing disease. And some species of microbes have no impact at all. And of course, the importance is that scientists also were able to look at the genome of those microbes. They're starting to look at the evolutionary relationships between the microbes. And in Salmonella, in particular, the bacteria that causes food poisoning, scientists were able to identify the genes that turned on to cause that virulence. And that was a brand new pathway that was not known as a way that microbes cause illness. And so by doing this in spaceflight, they've opened up the possibility of new ways to attack disease. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So those are three discoveries that I think are pretty exciting from our early research. And let's not be pointing this in the right place. There we go. Next, I want to talk a little bit about exploration and how the space station is serving as our step up to the next destination ahead of us. One way that we use the space station that really both saves cost, it provides more safety, saves development time, and it saves mission failure, is by testing materials on the International Space Station before we put them into free-flying satellites. A number of new materials, and people in this room know the number of new materials being developed through nanotechnology, through all kinds of different technological developments is just extraordinary. And by being sure how these materials will respond in an orbital environment with atomic oxygen, with radiation insults, you can sometimes be quite surprised. And so using the MISSI investigation, the Materials on ISS investigation, companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin test materials before they put them in other free-flying satellites. Boeing did a study recently finding that they saved 50% development cost on applying a new material to a satellite program by testing those materials and paints on the ISS. Something going on just starting this week that we're quite excited about is the Robotic Refueling mission. You can think about this as the Pony Express of space in a way, because once upon a time when westward expansion was going on, if you needed to get somewhere, you had to go on a horse, and that horse had so much fuel in it. And you could only go as far as that horse could take you. When the horse ran out of fuel, you were done. That's as far as you could go. Well, essentially, that's where we're at in space exploration today. We have to take all our fuel with us on that flight, and that really limits the extent or the distance that we can go. The next advance on the Pony Express was to have a depot where the ponies could come in and you could refuel them, you could train them out. There was a way station there that you could go to, and then you could extend your presence beyond that. And that's what Robotic Refueling mission is all about. It's testing the technologies we would need to robotically transfer fuel so that you could take a spacecraft, you could send it as far as you could go, and you could pre-position fuel there so it was waiting and ready. Any of you here who have hiked the Appalachian Trail know that that's a really important approach to getting a long distance in a primitive area. And so the Robotic Refueling mission, which started on orbit this week and will continue and will peak in some actual test fuel transfers when they get through all of their different protocols, is just a really important advance in this area of exploration. One other example of what we're doing on the space station, and a lot of this work is led right here at Ames, is the Spheres, a test bed system. Now this is a test bed designed for guidance, navigation, and control, especially satellite formation flying. And also could be used in developing autonomous arrays of satellites. And here you see 3 of those spheres navigating around each other. This is now operated as a facility for use both in education projects, but also in some pretty serious machine learning and development of space algorithms, and all of that's being led here at Ames. So it's a pretty exciting program, originally developed by Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And our work on bone, we're interested, of course, in bone loss in astronauts. They lose about as much bone in a month as a postmenopausal woman loses in a year. So you can see that that can be a significant set of bone remodeling. And also work here at the Ames Research Center facilitated Amgen flying animals on ISS to test out a prototype drug that has now come to market called Prolia. And by using spaceflight animal tests, they were able to identify more about the mechanisms of how that drug was working, which was useful to them as they brought that drug to market. And so that's a case where the things that we care about for astronauts, having their bones be strong, say when they get to a destination like Mars, also has benefits right back here on Earth for women and even men that may be suffering from osteoporosis. And so all of those things are pretty exciting results, but now I want to get down to some benefits where it's just the core. These are the ones that I get kind of emotional about, I get really excited about, where you're talking about lives being saved and people, really important benefits back here on Earth. This is a picture of a woman, an Inuit woman, north of the Arctic Circle. She's getting a maternal fetal ultrasound to identify if she might have problems in delivery before she goes into labor. You can imagine whether you're in a village in Africa or north of the Arctic Circle, if your only hospital is an airlift away, identifying a problem once you're in labor is really too late. In Canada, it's extremely expensive to airlift women in. They die in the helicopters sometimes in a challenging delivery. In Africa, the airlift isn't available at all. So if women can't be taken in a truck to a hospital at the right time, they may lose the mother and the child. And this technology for doing these remote ultrasounds without having a trained sonographer present in the room was developed originally for the astronauts on the International Space Station, so they could do ultrasounds on each other. They also don't have the time to get 2 years of training to be a trained sonographer. The techniques have now also been adopted by the American College of Surgeons as the way that you train all surgeons to do ultrasounds for ultrasound-guided surgery. So these are really exciting applications that benefit daily lives of people. Here you see some work going on with the vaccine development or the vaccine testing I mentioned earlier that builds from this original discovery on microbial virulence. So here you can see some salmonella bacteria being grown on the ISS. And several competing teams now have been doing studies of bacteria and looking at virulence mechanisms in order to develop vaccines. That's how that benefit or that discovery will come back here on Earth to benefit all of our lives. Because in developing either a vaccine for salmonella that perhaps you could have before going on a trip, or that could, if you have a big outbreak, could help people not be so overtaken by this can be quite debilitating disease. All those things could be important. Some of these teams are also working on methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. That's the superbug that people get in hospitals that's resistant to most antibiotics, and is often something that gets the elderly once they get into a hospital and they have that hospital-acquired infection, get pneumonia, and that's the cause of the death of the elderly. Fairly common around the United States. So these vaccines, should they make it to production, will really be important in saving lives. Finally, I want to show you an example from Japan. This is a protein crystal for human prostaglandin D2 synthase. I hope you know there'll be an exam in the back. And if you can write this after I go on 3 or 4 charts, you might win a meteorite. So, but you can see on the left, a picture's worth 1,000 words. On the left is what that best-grown crystal on the ground looked like. On the right is the best-grown space crystal. And not surprisingly, you could get a better structure from that slightly better crystal. And what that structure did is it let us know about that water molecule right there. Let scientists know about that. Now, water molecule doesn't sound very important, but it then gave scientists the insight to understand how this protein is folding. And that gave them the understanding they needed to target a drug development that would help with this pathway. It's a pathway for a disease called Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, a genetic disease that affects about 1 in 4,000 boys. It's on the Y chromosome. Boys that are born with this are wheelchair or bedbound by the time they're about 9 years old. So it's really a horrible disease. And the pharmaceutical companies working with Japanese investigators have gotten as far now as testing this in an animal model with astounding results. So this is another area of drug development that we're really watching carefully. And I want to mention, I've showed you some really exciting examples. These things take time, and across all biotechnology and pharmaceutical development, we talk about the valley of death. The best idea possible over here in the research side doesn't always make it to the patient's bedside. A lot of things can go wrong. When you move from animal models to humans in those early clinical trials, you may find there are horrible side effects or that the drug doesn't work as you think it's going to work. A pharmaceutical company may decide it's not worth the investment based on the number of people who will use it. It may be that there's some other problem with intellectual property or something. So it's difficult to get across this valley of death, and so I don't want you to think that all these examples I showed you today are definitely going to make it through this challenging time. But I think what you can see is if we've got these many examples that are quite exciting and compelling from our early space station research, when we were really mostly building it and doing the stuff on the side, where can we go in the next decade when we have full access to the laboratory and research as its primary mission? One more example then of benefits back here on Earth. This is the robotic arm, the Canadarm, on the International Space Station. That was Canada's contribution to ISS. And that technology has now been transferred to physician-assisted neurosurgery. And you can see that neurosurgery robot here, developed by MDA, which is their major robotics technology company. And here's a picture of one of the young women who has been able to have surgery, neurosurgery. She was considered inoperable because the surgery was so delicate that no surgeon was willing to try it. But by using this robotic assistance, the surgery could be done with more stability and more carefully than a human being, even the best neurosurgeon in the world, could do it. And so that in test cases now, they have 3 or 4 patients whose lives have been saved using this robotically assisted device. And it's something we're really excited to see spreading through the medical community for neurosurgeons. This is a picture of the water rack on the International Space Station, and Leland Melvin doing some work on it when it was first installed there. In this case, space technology has come back home and really provided some extraordinary benefits. The bed reactor that was built for the water rack, essentially astronauts drink their own urine. So if you thought you wanted to be an astronaut, maybe now you don't anymore. That's what closed-loop life support is a nice word for. And the water rack is what makes this possible. Well, if you can do that, if you can recycle all of those wastewaters on ISS, that's also a great technology. Small, it's compact, it doesn't use a lot of power. So it's a great technology that you could take back to Earth and implement in disaster regions. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened with that technology built for the space station. These are some children in a village after the earthquake in Pakistan in 2008. The technology's also been deployed in Haiti. The Red Cross buys these and can take them into places and help to prevent cholera outbreaks after there's been a significant event where people don't have access to fresh water. So this is definitely saving lives and decreasing the misery of people that are in the worst of disaster situations. It's an extraordinary transfer of technology to benefit life on Earth. And last but not least is education. And as Dwayne mentioned, we do all of these things in space so that we can improve our economies. But we get these bonuses too. One of the bonuses is when we're doing these things that are challenging and exciting, we also get the next generation excited to come in behind us and take humankind even further. This is just one picture of an experiment with spiders in space. It was watched by over 400,000 people, students all around the country. There was a curriculum that let students design experiments and have spiders living in their own classrooms and test hypotheses, compare them to this. And we're now working to extend that curriculum because once you put something on the web, you can extend a curriculum almost for free. And so extending that curriculum to other countries, translating it into other languages, allows the space station really to be of universal benefit to the entire world. Some of the stories I've told you today, we captured last week as the heads of agencies got together to talk about the International Space Station. And we captured that in a book and a set of web publications that are all online now called ISS Benefits for Humanity. And you can go online at some links I'll give you next here. But before, I'll leave the links on at the very end, so if you want to copy them down. Also, in the back, there are some bookmarks with the International Space Station on them, and you don't have to copy these links down. You can just pick up a bookmark and take it with you, and it's got all of those on there. But for those of you thinking about, is the space station something for me? Gee, I've heard that it's a little bit tricky. I've heard that I heard someone say it took them forever. So we've been working really hard on the customer intake side so that new people can come in. They don't have to be an expert in space. They don't have to be a quote-unquote rocket scientist to do science in space. And so also online you can find kind of a user's guide to how to get into the space station, and it's a 5-phase process. First, you've got to find sponsorship. It may be from NASA funding opportunities. It may be from working with CASIS, in partnership with CASIS, to get funding from outside organizations. And it may be self-funded. We have users that come forward that have their own idea, they have their own capital, and they're just ready to go. And that's sort of phase 1. Phase 2 is getting your needs into our strategic planning process, and we have a customer service organization that basically can help to do that. We work with CASIS. If you're coming with CASIS, we work with the NASA sponsors if you come from NASA. Then we get that into tactical planning, where we actually get the research plan going, and you've got the astronauts trained and all of those things done to make you successful in space. Then you do your operations on ISS, and then you get your data and you analyze it, and you tell us about the publications. So we've really been working to streamline that process, and this information is also available online at the links that I'll show you. So let me end here with a few links for you. You can see our main ISS Research and Technology page, and you can get to all of the information I talked about from that central location. You can also follow us on Twitter. We tweet multiple times a day to keep you abreast on what's going on the space station, what the exciting accomplishments are. We have a blog, a lab loft, and at the very bottom here is the direct link if you want to go right to the ISS benefits that I talked about today. And that document's available to download and will be in distribution shortly. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer. I think I might have a couple minutes to answer questions, and it looks like